Look at Efrain. Look at him. Your car's tiny.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third and final day of our summit. It's been a fruitful and very engaging couple of days. I want to first thank our partners at USC Dornsif and our wonderful partners at Weingart, as well as all our community partners who have made this event a tremendous success. It's a great pleasure this morning to have an opportunity to introduce a true champion and I think an embodiment of the transformation and inclusive work that we believe is important for the future of Los Angeles County. We've talked about the last couple of days, the role of immigrants in LA, the fact that immigrants are Los Angeles. We've talked about the needs, but more importantly, opportunities. And today, in this third and final day, our focus is on how we seize the moment. What does an inclusive Los Angeles look like? We've heard from UCLA's economic forecast that LA County is expected GDP growth is over 6%, more than what we expected. And we know that immigrants will play a key part in driving that successful growth, but will they be included? Will they be empowered and strengthened so that all of Los Angeles can succeed? That requires strong leadership. And this morning, it's my tremendous honor to introduce a true champion and for me, mentor and friend, our council member, Kevin De León from the 14th City Council District here in Los Angeles. Councilmember De León represents really Los Angeles in the sense that from humble beginnings, he was the son to a single immigrant mother who worked as a housekeeper. He was the first in his family to graduate high school, as most of us have been, and then on to college, and then took his passion from community organizing to governing organizing and served as the first Latino president pro tem of the California State Senate, the first in 130 years. He there worked, and this is important, to actually shape what an inclusive California looks like through policy. Policies like SB 54, when our immigrant communities were under attack from Washington, D.C. Funding for services and legal services through the One California funding and the importance that it took, driver's licenses, all things that have shaped California into what it is today. And now, most recently in the city council, I want to express my thanks to the council member for being a champion and helping to commit the city to multi-year funding of the LA Justice Fund, one of the strongest steps the city and the county have taken to build the infrastructure for supporting our immigrant communities, particularly those that have been denied status here in the county and in the country. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce our councilman from the 14th district in the city of LA and my friend, Kevin De León.
Thank you so very much, Efrain. Muchas gracias for that wonderful introduction of my person. Antes que nada, me siento bien honrado estar aquí con cada uno de ustedes. Un abrazo muy fuerte de solidaridad a cada uno de ustedes. Efrain, thank you very much. On the contrary, for your incredible leadership. Just very quickly, if you're kind of wondering where I may be at this moment, I'm actually in an immigrant community right now in Boyle Heights. I'm in Ramona Gardens. I'm at Murchison Elementary School. About to give the commencement speech to hundreds of young Latinos students, the young children of immigrants who live right here in Ramona Gardens. So I'm in the principal's office right now. I've been in the principal's office lots of times, but this time I'm in the principal's office for good reasons. So I want to thank you very much, Efrain, for your wonderful introduction. And again, thank you. To each and every one of you, good morning to all of you. I want to say it's an honor, me siento bien honrado, to be with you on this third and final day of the conference. When I was invited and asked to share a few words with all of you what the future looks like for immigrants in Los Angeles, I couldn't help but think about the timing. Obviously, we just faced arguably the most difficult years in our lifetime with this global pandemic, the coronavirus. And I can't help but draw a connection between how the pandemic exposed the gross disparities in our society along economic and racial lines. And among those disparities were even more magnified for immigrants, but especially Latino immigrants. Now, I've come to the conclusion that there's no going back to the normal from this point forward. And let me just say, and let me just give you my perspective on how I came to this conclusion. As all of you know, LA County has a population of more than 10 million residents. And during February and March, LA County became the epicenter of COVID-19 infections and mortality rates nationwide. But the numbers weren't equal across all communities. And statistics data points showed that my district of 250,000 had become ground zero in LA County. And the other communities that are very similar face those horrific numbers. Communities in my district had the highest rates of COVID-19 infections and deaths in all of Los Angeles County at the height of this global pandemic. And there's no surprise that many of my constituents are frontline workers, jornaleros, recamareras, working in restaurants, truck drivers. They are America's frontline workers. Many are immigrants, many are documented and undocumented. And despite taking every possible precaution, they still got exposed and they brought the virus home. Many became sick, and as we all know, because we all felt it personally, many died. When the federal stimulus checks were going out across the country, immigrants were excluded. Unemployment exclusion, excluded among the last to get access to the vaccination, while we died in higher numbers than any other place in the county of LA. Now, government programs, as we know, abandon our immigrant communities, despite them being the success of our economy. They are the backbone of our economy, making California the fifth largest economy on planet Earth. Then, when the first set of vaccinations began to be distributed, public health officials here in one of the most diverse counties in the world ignored the raging infections, I believe strongly, in brown and black and immigrant communities. All you had to do was just stand at the parking lot, perhaps at Dodger Stadium, and see disparities between who was receiving vaccinations and who wasn't. Whether it was BMWs, Mercedes-Benz, Teslas, Lexus, luxury vehicles with drivers from other parts of town coming into communities to get the vaccination. I witnessed it here right in Ramona Gardens, where we saw Range Rovers pull up. The pandemic brought to light all these fundamental inequalities and inequities in our systems. But it wasn't just the economic inequality we witnessed or the vaccination disparities that were exposed. We all know the educational inequities were on full display. We had kids, immigrant children of immigrants who had to stay home but had very low quality internet, who had no access at all whatsoever. That chasm between those who have access to educational resources and those who don't only widen, but especially for our immigrant community. So when I come back to the question of what the future of immigrants in LA looks like, I'm convinced that going back to normal is not even an option, because the old normal poses the greatest risk to our immigrant communities. I'll go so far as to say that these inequalities, these inequities were not the product of the previous 4 years of hostility and deep animus from the Trump administration. No, we all know that they existed long before Donald J. Trump. They are part of a larger systemic challenge that we have to work together to dissect and, quite frankly, eradicate. It's very much like a disease. And we have to be very precise in targeting areas affected by social justice, by racism, by sexism and classism, and how it impacts our immigrant communities. If we just look at the health disparities, for example, we know that Latinos in LA County faced unique challenges more greater than access to equality, or I should say quality healthcare. But the solution will not be as simple as passing a few laws to eliminate disparities. It's going to require every segment of our society working together. And that means each and every one of you, public-private partnerships that will be so critical to close those health gaps for our immigrant communities. Philanthropy will be another approach, but again, not the only one. How we build nonprofit infrastructure and civic organizations will offer incredible additional strategies. We have tremendous assets joining together in this amazing conference from some of these very same sectors. And just a few weeks ago, we worked together on the best example of a public-private partnership on the issue of immigration through the innovative LA Justice Fund that Efrain just mentioned a few moments ago. The city and the county, along with nonprofits and the philanthropy backers, united back in 2017 to establish this program to provide legal services to immigrants facing deportation proceedings. So just last week, Mayor Garcetti signed our city budget, which I made certain would dedicate $6 million over the course of next 3 years to the LA Justice Fund. I have no doubt that this is a pool of intellectual talent here that we brought together. We'll begin to synthesize ideas and craft solutions. If there's any silver lining to what we went through during this pandemic, it's that it's accelerated our awareness of the threats of inequality, inequity facing immigrants in LA as well as elsewhere. And this awareness places us in a position where we can think more critically and broadly about our political strength, which is growing significantly. But we have to exercise that capital. We're currently in the middle of a national discussion of immigration reform, a policy that will help shape the political strength of immigrants and Latinos for decades to come. This coincides with the process of redistricting, not only in Los Angeles, but nationwide. And if you don't think that there's growing political power among Latinos, all you need to do is take a look at the national effort to disenfranchise millions of people of color, but especially Latinos and Latino immigrants who became naturalized citizens. In the same way, opponents see the changing tide and are trying to derail immigration reform. We have to seize the opportunity to mobilize through action. And I would also add that COVID heightened the complexity of the Latino community. In other communities, we see the breakdowns in age groups, income levels, occupational fields, et cetera, disaggregated data points, categories reflecting nuances and complexities within a group. We have to embrace that same level of complexity if we're going to engage in crafting solutions to the unique challenges facing our immigrant communities here in LA. And after all, not all immigrant communities, as we know, are the same. But the future of immigrant communities in Los Angeles rests in getting its members involved in confronting the issues of inequality, inequity head on. We have no other choice. From economic empowerment to environmental justice to the issue of economic equality, and from healthcare to education, but immigration reform. And now the ashes of COVID-19 and the Trump anti-immigrant rhetoric, we have an opportunity to envision a new future for LA that reflects the reality that immigrants have already reshaped the landscape of Los Angeles and California. That's why, even during these difficult times, I'm still very encouraged by this conference, because these are the discussions we need to be having across a range of issues. I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you. And I will say, because, speaking with some folks earlier today about the theme about how we seize this moment and how this moment is with us right now. Let me say this. Immigrants have always paved the way in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a very immigrant city, county, no question. We have the largest concentration of immigrants throughout the world, throughout the country, right here in Los Angeles. But oftentimes the narrative is not that immigrants are not really part of the political narrative of Los Angeles. We're the jornaleros, los jardineros, limpiacasas, cocineros, los mecánicos, somos recamareras, estamos cuidando los hijos de los ricos en las zonas más exclusivas in Los Angeles. So there's really no depiction, no narrative of us. And for one, I can say, as the youngest child of a single immigrant mother with a third grade education, I'm kind of tired already. And I'm over, the invisible portrayals, if you will, of our community. We are Los Angeles. We're half the population of the city of LA. And without the immigrant community, this city doesn't function. This city doesn't work. This state does not work and doesn't move forward without immigrants from all over the world, but especially from our own Western Hemisphere and to the south of us, specifically Mexico in Central America and other South American nations and Caribbean nations. We are the backbone of our economy. And as a result, like I said a few moments ago, when COVID-19 ravaged our communities, the insult and indignity of not receiving any help from the federal government, not even from the state government when it came to unemployment, the irony that our workers put money into the pot and the moment of need, they weren't able to take any money to benefit their families, to pay for that roof over their head, the rent, to put food on the table, and that multi-generations under one roof, the density in our communities, and forced to work because our immigrant communities couldn't Instacart, Gelson's, or Whole Foods to deliver to their homes. They couldn't do Postmates and have sushi or other foods delivered to their house. They had to work, and they were always at the risk, of being, kicked out of their homes if they didn't pay the rent, and therefore they exposed themselves even more so. That's why it's time to seize that moment. Now, we have a democratic trifecta in Washington, D.C., the executive branch and both bicameral legislative bodies, the House as well as the U.S. Senate. Now's the time to seize the moment, not to sort of hedge bets, not sort of take incrementalist steps, but now a comprehensive immigration reform, not to negotiate against our own interests and go for low-hanging fruit and say, hey, you know what, we're good with just agricultural workers and we're good with dreamers. But putting our dreamers on the pathway to citizenship when their mothers and fathers are still vulnerable to deportation is not my idea of comprehensive immigration reform. And I know there may be a spectrum of diverse opinions and thoughts, even amongst ourselves. We should get what we can, and then forget about the rest until that moment arrives when we can truly get it. But I'm of the thinking that when we have political capital, you seize that moment. When I was a leader of your California State Senate, as Efrain said, the first Latino in over 130 years, I didn't hesitate when it came to driver's license. I didn't hesitate to make California the first and largest state in the country to declare ourselves a sanctuary state, that we would recognize the amazing contributions of our immigrant communities and say, we will defend them. We will protect them. Because that's our role as elected officials, to step up during the most difficult, stressful times. Not when times are good and the cup runneth over with the economy, but the most difficult times is when you have to stand up. And that's why, right now, we need immigration reform. Not to hem and haw, not to sort of hedge our bets, not to go for the low-hanging fruit, because this is something you can do in your sleep when it comes to dreamers and DACA. We need to legalize 10 million individuals because the vast majority of those individuals are right here in our very own city and county and state. Right here. We are the epicenter. And we were the epicenter and ground zero when it came to infections and COVID deaths throughout the country. That's why this is the moment to seize, like you said. This is the moment that we utilize our political capital, do everything within our power to improve the human condition for all of our immigrant communities, regardless of who they are and where they come from, regardless of who they love and which God they pray to. They're human beings that deserve dignity and respect. It is in our own political, economic interests that we normalize their legal status so they become full-fledged members and not second-class citizens, not third-class citizens for years and years and decades. Enough right now. When we have the power, you seize it and you go for it. And that's what I want to submit to each and every one of you. Listen, it is an honor to share a few words and my thoughts. My thoughts are my thoughts, are my own commentaries, my own editorial, but those are the thoughts as the youngest child, again, of a single immigrant mother, a woman who was a housekeeper, who worked her fingers to the bone. And guess what? My story is not a unique story. My story is not an original story, because my story is your story and your story is my story. It's all of our stories as the children of immigrant families and those who grew up in the immigrant households right there. So this is our moment. We should seize it. Looking forward to working with each and every one of you at different capacities. Efrain, and to each and every one of you, it is an incredible honor to spend a few moments with you. I'm going to leave now because I know you guys have a full day of conference, and I got to give a speech to immigrant children right now, right here in Ramona Gardens in Ball Heights. Gracias a cada uno de ustedes. Gracias a todos.